Welcome to Tips for Teletherapy Counseling with Children and Students. My name's Susie, and I'm a school psychologist who's been providing teletherapy for the last few months since distance learning began. So, step number one is just to get organized. I spent at least a week or two getting organized, putting all of my parents' names, email addresses all together. So that way I can easily access them for mass emails or even individual emails and phone calls. Next, I created a counseling log and I put all of my students' names into it and the session dates that I had set up for them. And then I would put in their goals if they had an IEP or 504 or just their general goals we were working towards, like coping skills or something, or stress management. And then I set it up so that I could put the activity in progress for each session. My next step was parent communication. So I sent a mass email to all of the parents that the students that were on my client list, and I included a teletherapy waiver. There's like new COVID-19 waivers and whatever your district or your company has. And then I had a little discussion of confidentiality just to remind parents that with counseling, they are supposed to give their child some personal space. And then a discussion of my expectations. So, punctuality to the session, privacy, ideally no eating during my session, and any counseling homework that I was going to be giving. So, just a little extra instruction on how to support their child. I still had kids eat on occasion, but just setting up those rules so that the parents are aware did help curb some of those behaviors of like, I'm just at home in my pajamas, eating my snacks and so forth. So when I would send a general email to all the parents with like a weekly update or just that first email, I did blind CC all the parents so that they couldn't see the other parents' email addresses. It's just an easy way to, so you don't have to send like, 15 individual emails and like copy and paste or whatever. And then if you are sending an individual email about like their session time or some concerns, that can be in the to box. Okay, so now let's work on a little bit more organization. I did ask the parents, I would give them maybe 3 time slots when I was trying to set up every student's Zoom session. You don't have to be as nice, of course. Your schedule is when hopefully they can make time for it. And if, they can't make a session, then the parent can switch their Zoom session. So I don't really like Google Hangouts. I gave it a try for a hot minute and I didn't like it. So I just started using Zoom, and that's actually what the teachers at my school district started using. So it worked out pretty well that all the kids knew how to use it. And I pre-scheduled everyone's counseling sessions. And for the first 2 weeks, I emailed the parents the link, and then I set up a Google Classroom for each individual student, and that's where I posted their Zoom link so that once we got going with everything, they were independently able to access their Zoom link at their specific time. I really liked using the Google Classroom. I'll go into that in a minute. But Zoom was my preference. You could change the backgrounds. There's screen sharing, so I could put up PowerPoint things or videos, and you can mute the student, and there's breakout rooms if you have like an aide or an intern or something that can do something small with the students if you have a group. My district only allowed individual sessions, so I didn't use that feature, but it could be helpful. So now I'm going to talk about why I used Google Classroom. I had to create a classroom for each individual student. Yes, everything is time consuming with distance learning and teletherapy, but it really helped with organization and helping students just have more privacy and responsibility to log into their weekly counseling sessions. And I had definitely a few students who had parents that were working at home and just, got busy and couldn't remember to log their child in if I was just sending the Zoom link to the parent email. And, a lot of times children and students, they don't have personal email addresses. So the Google Classroom, I sent the link on how to add it to the parent. And then once it was set up, the student could access it themselves. And you can attach videos, worksheets. Um, if students have access to YouTube, I would just copy, a good YouTube video link, and I could give just a general assignment, and then the student could comment if they did the assignment or answer questions about the video in the comment section. So for my counseling, I use a lot of multimedia. I think it's great during distance learning to just be able to send them some videos. And then, as I said earlier, they would write in the comment box their homework assignment or answer questions. And that kind of just gets their focus on what is the topic of this week's session. I do have videos. I have one thing that on my Teacher Pay Teacher site that's a list of over 110 videos, and it's on various counseling topics, and it's available for under $5. It's pretty much just an organized compilation of all the videos that I use in my counseling with my students and with my campus for social and emotional learning. Most videos are under 5 minutes, and I think it's a fun way to, a lot of them are like cartoon videos, and it just helps kids kind of see and not just have an adult talk to them about a topic or do a worksheet. I think it makes it a little bit more fun and interactive for them. When doing teletherapy with children, communication with their parents is really one of the most important things that you need to continually be doing. I did have to call parents who just never responded to that initial email. And then I had to call them weekly. And there were, I would say, out of my 16 clients, I had 3 that just the parents never responded to emails, voicemail messages, and they just must have been going through something and very stressed, or they just were working and didn't have time to get it together and help their child. They didn't prioritize their child's counseling services. If the child has divorced parents, you want to make sure that both parents are informed of the services and expectations, especially if they split their week at different houses, and then try to schedule their counseling ideally for the most responsible parent who is, just through your history with them, has the best communication. But having both parents informed is very important, because if one, finds out that their child's receiving counseling and claims that they had no idea because the other parent didn't tell them, then you can run into some trouble. And then I sent weekly reminders, not just a general email with updates or resources. And it just kind of helped remind the parents on the Monday, like, oh, my child's counseling, is going to be on Tuesday at 10 o'clock. It just kind of helps them support their child better. I did try to put all of my counseling towards the beginning of the week, and that way, by Friday, everyone's kind of done with distance learning, and they're just ready for the weekend. They're not thinking about, oh, my child's counseling services necessarily. So we also have to communicate with your students' teachers, especially if you're a school-based counselor, school psychologist, social worker. Our goal is to make sure that they're functioning in school, because usually their services are based on the fact that they are not functioning within the school setting. If you're providing just home counseling, I think it's still important to contact the teachers once in a while and say, hey, is this client of mine attending their Zoom instructional times? Are they completing assignments? Because school is children's main job. So if they're not functioning well, they're probably not functioning well at school, and we want to support them as best we can with being good students and at least trying their best, even if the academics are a little bit hard. And teachers have great information. They often are the first to know if maybe the family's moving or there's some kind of stressor in the home environment. Maybe a parent or grandparent got COVID-19 or is just ill, or there's some kind of trauma that might have happened. The teachers might know before you do. So it's great to keep up communication with the teachers. Also, just what their general mood and affect is during Zoom meetings and Zoom classrooms is good information. One other thing that my other psychologist colleagues and I did was we set up a Google Voice number. We did this through our district, but you can actually do it individually too. It just helps if you have clients that you think could be in crisis or in danger of some manner, and they need to contact you, and you don't want the parent or the student to have your real cell phone number, which most of us don't. It worked really well just because you can screen the voicemail as the person's talking, and then you can decide whether or not you want to pick up or call them back a little bit later. Tips for your students. I definitely asked a lot of my students to wear headphones, kind of like a wink wink, like, hey Sam, where's your headphones? When I saw mom kind of in the background, or even I had parents chit-chatting or commenting back to me that their student was not telling me the truth on something, like how much work they were doing, or if they were reading an extra 20 minutes, or doing their exercise, or using their coping strategies. So, just for privacy, confidentiality, encourage headphone wearing, and it just helps reduce distraction also, and those prying ears. But sometimes we want to involve parents. Sometimes. Generally the counseling services that I provide are very just skill based, social skills, organizational skills, coping skills. But if your student is, or child that you're counseling is just not functioning well, or they're not telling you the truth, or their teacher emails you that they're not doing any work, I think it's totally appropriate to bring that parent in, because the parents are supervising their child hopefully all day. Or sometimes you have to talk to the parent even with the child there about, like, hey, can you check their math homework every day? And maybe Samantha needs help submitting it. Just get those parents on the same page that the teacher is contacting you, that there's some difficulty. And sometimes parents are more receptive to talking to the therapist or counselor than the teacher. For whatever reason, sometimes teachers are a little bit more intimidating, and that therapist is like the medium person, the go-to collaborator. Also, you can talk to the parent, hey, is Aiden being, eating well? And you can kind of have them have a conversation together with you if you suspect there's an area of difficulty. I even had parents email me prior to the session and say, my child's having, seems a little bit more depressed this week. He's complaining a lot about the distance learning work. And then I would email them back and say, okay, why don't you join the conversation? And, we can kind of talk about it. And I just like to kind of play dumb, like, oh, so your mom's here and she's saying that you're not, you're getting stressed out about your work. Why do you think that is? And I think it's appropriate because they're learning at home, and they're just at home, and that's where their school is, that's where their social life is. So involving those parents is completely appropriate. We didn't sign up for counseling, for like family counseling, unless you're like an MFT and that's what you're doing. But or even parenting, classes. But if that's helping the student reach their goals, then we want to do everything we can to really support them. And since they are just in that home environment, it really is more working with the parents than the teachers, which is what I would normally be doing in the school setting. I also will recruit parents sometimes to the session if I want them to be on the same page with their counseling related homework. Like, I want Sam or Eric to, get outside more. So can you guys agree as a family to go and do some bike riding or go for a family walk around the block? Because we are allowed to get exercise outside of the home right now. That is allowed. So just reminding parents that their child maybe isn't getting enough fresh air or enough exercise will help get them on the same page with some of those goals that you might have for them. And then checking that schoolwork, because if they're not doing the schoolwork at all, and the parent maybe isn't aware, they're just assuming, they're not checking as some parents do, then getting them on the same page that there is an area of difficulty with turning in schoolwork or attending Zoom meetings. And then I know we're just talking to these students, we're interacting with them over video, and I think it's just really important to make it as fun as possible. As I said, I use some videos, but I also have created a bunch of games. Sometimes I'll just use one of my games that I would play normally in the counseling room, and you would use a deck of cards instead of a beach ball or whatever, or the game board, and I would just use the cards from that, and then have them pick a card. From like, I would hold 5 up and then pick a card. I'd say, okay, pick which one, tell me when to stop. And it just made it more interactive and fun and helped them be more engaged so that we could facilitate discussion on whatever the issue is or work on specific skills. I just wanted to take the last few moments of my presentation to thank you for supporting children. And if you'd like some of my resources, they're available on my Teacher Pay Teachers store.